All right, y'all. So I've been reading a lot of comments lately, and a lot of it came from like the hot takes video. But I'm kind of getting sick of this one comparison, and I mean, some of you guys might already know where I'm going with this, but booster packs are not loot boxes, and like the title says. But even if they were loot boxes, that actually isn't so bad, or at least not as bad as the alternative. So my hot take has been that booster packs are fine the way that they are because it's not illegal gambling, at least not in my opinion. But, well, that's my hot take. But first, let me break down my point. So, booster packs are not loot boxes. Loot boxes were popularized in like Overwatch and whatever the other games had loot boxes. I know all about Overwatch loot boxes because I played that game. And the major difference between a loot box, like an Overwatch one, and a booster pack, like in Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon, in a loot box, you get a randomized thing. There's some set chance to get what you want. But like we all know, you don't always get what you want. You have a low chance of getting it. But when you open a loot box, the things you get inside, they have no monetary value. They're non-transferable. They're not tradable. They don't actually help you get what it is that you want. However, a booster pack, like a Yu-Gi-Oh! Booster pack or anything, every single card in a booster pack has a market value. Or at least it has a perceived value. You know, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a trading card game. When Yu-Gi-Oh! Was kind of created, we were supposed to open up booster packs and then we traded our cards around so we could build the decks that we wanted. That model was fine for the beginning of card games until we got into, well, meta games. And you could argue that Konami knew that this is how this would go since, you know, Magic the Gathering exists, Pokemon exists. Like, card games have been relatively the same way since 1992. But because of metagames, that meant that certain cards were desired by way more people than copies of the card that could exist. So if 7 people are all trying to trade for the same card, that doesn't really work. And oftentimes when you're trading cards, you can't always match up with the person who has the card that you want. Like, let's say I have a what's a Yu-Gi-Oh card? Let's just say I have a Zeus, right? I got AA Zeus, and 3 people in my shop want this Zeus. I don't need it. The problem is, I actually don't need anything. I'm not looking for any cards, but I don't need the Zeus. Well, that's where money comes in. That's where having a value for the card comes in. So even though I can't make a trade for the Zeus, I can still name my price, and that whole thing created our secondary market. So Zeus is an expensive example, but literally every single card you find in a booster pack has a market value, whether it's 1 cent or $100. That means that technically, every time you open a booster pack, you're actually accruing value towards the value of whatever the card is that you wanted. That wasn't a thing in Overwatch, at least not to that degree. Overwatch had their currency that you could get in some of your loot boxes, yada yada yada. The main issue that I think a lot of people have, when they say loot box, they immediately get angry and they remember how awful loot boxes were. But I've been playing this game, or I'm not playing it anymore, but I was playing Overwatch 2 all last year, or at least when it released up until like January of this year. I was playing Overwatch 2. And I saw what happened when you remove loot boxes from a game. That lets the company become a price setter. And by price setter, I mean, imagine if Yu-Gi-Oh! Didn't have a secondary market. Instead, Konami just sold you the cards directly. But Konami gets to decide how much the cards are worth. We already don't trust Konami like to do most things. We barely trust Konami to make a ban list. I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm just saying a lot of players, they don't really like the way Konami handles their ban lists. Would you trust Konami to set a monetary value for every single card in this game? Remember, this is a corporation whose job is to make profits. I promise you it would not be a fair shake. What we have currently in Yu-Gi-Oh! And pretty much every TCG, we have a secondary market that is run by supply and demand where prices are going to get as low as the market dictates. Konami and whatever other governing bodies in card games, their hands are off of that. That's really run by us, the community. We can decide to buy cards or we can choose not to. But at least we have the choice. If we didn't have booster packs and Konami just got to control the actual price of every single card, we wouldn't have choice anymore. Then there'd be no freedom. It wouldn't be a fun time. Well, for some. And I think that's where this conversation gets a little more interesting. I think a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh players who hate booster packs, who hate loot boxes, who are always commenting about how Yu-Gi-Oh should do away with the booster pack system, I think a lot of those are more competitive-minded players because there is something to be said when you just want to compete. You just need to get the cards, and you don't really care how you get them or the price. When you're a more competitive-minded player, you're a bit more flexible on price of cards because you're playing to win, and so you're not worried too much about the prices as compared to someone who's more casually minded, who operates on an extremely fixed budget, who can't wrap their head around buying meta staple cards when they're relevant because they really don't need them like that. So I do think that this conversation kind of runs into a bit of the casual competitive divide because, I get it. Competitive players just want to get their hands on cards fast. They want to get them easily, and they just want to get to competing as conveniently as possible. More casual players, they care more about how they get the cards. And if we had a system where Konami just directly sold us cards, or they sold box sets of just every card in a set, I think competitive players would have no problem investing in those cards because they will, they're going to get the job done. But for people on a fixed income, I just don't think that'll work out. With booster packs, the secondary market lets prices go up and down. It ebbs and flows. Prices can get driven down through reprints and everything else. I don't know if we'd have reprints if we didn't have booster packs. And if there's no reprints, then prices would just stay at whatever Konami says they are. And I don't know. I'm just not down with that. I'm not that big of a Konami hater, but I sure as hell wouldn't trust Konami to tell me what every single card in this game is worth. That'll probably be the end of the game for me. But anyway, those are just my thoughts about booster packs and loot boxes, and how even if booster packs are loot boxes, it's really not that bad, or at least better than the alternative. Anyway, let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Pass turn.